Today, we are getting back into our GitHub workflow lessons. We are on to lesson number 3, which deals with branching workflow. And the reason that we branch our workflow is so that, like we discussed yesterday, we have a safe place where we can experiment and make changes in the code without messing up the main project. For today's activity, we're going to be using github.com, GitHub Desktop, and Visual Studio Code. And we're going to start by creating a new repository on github.com. And then we're going to move over to GitHub Desktop to clone that repository so that we have a local copy of it. And then from there, we're going to create a new branch in that repository so that we have a safe place to make changes. And after that, we're going to open up Visual Studio Code so we can actually make the changes that we want to make to the file. So the file we're going to make today, or the repository we're going to make today, is going to be called Creative Classroom Technologies. And we're going to use it as a place to have a classroom log where at the end of class we can hop on and we can type in the date and what we learned that day so that we have something to go back and reference throughout the semester. When we get into Visual Studio Code, I'm going to show you guys how to add new files to your repository, which includes naming them and also adding content to them. After we've finished adding the content and making the changes we want, we're going to save our work on Visual Studio Code, go back to GitHub Desktop, commit those changes so that they're saved locally on our computer, and then we're going to create a pull request so that the work we did locally on our computer can get pulled up into our main project on github.com. And that might sound like a lot, but it's really not going to be that bad, and we're going to take it step by step today. So first things first, we're going to open up either Google Chrome or Safari, and we're going to go to github.com. And it takes you to the home page, your feed, just like if you were on social media. Up in the top right corner here, there's the Profile button. Go ahead and click on that. And then in the options, you'll see there's one that says Repositories. Go ahead and click on that. Okay, this opens our repositories page where we can see all of the different repositories or projects that we have on GitHub. Today, we're going to create a new repository by coming up to this green button on the top right side of the screen and clicking New. All right, we have 2 steps to create a new repository. The first is to give it a name. I'm going to call this Creative-Classroom-Technologies. And it's telling me it's available because I haven't used this name for any of my repositories that already exist. Now we're going to move on to the description. And I'm going to say this is a learning journal for concepts learned in class. That way I know exactly what kind of files and information is going to be in here. Moving down to step 2, we have the configuration. We can either have a repository be public so that anyone on the internet can see the repository, and then you can choose who's able to commit or make changes to it. Or it can be private, where you choose specifically who can see and commit or make changes to the repository. We're going to go ahead and set this to private. It's got an option for starting with a template. We're going to leave this as no template, but if you start using GitHub and you've got projects that you do on a regular basis, you could already have a template for people to make copies of. And then this section down here, we're going to add a README or turn it on. As a reminder, the README file is part of every single GitHub repository, and it's got information about what the project does and how you use it. We'll fill this out later. Git or .git ignore, we're going to leave on the no setting. We'll be using this in later lessons for programs that create files on our desktop that we don't need to send up to github.com. When that happens, we add a .gitignore file, and it tells GitHub, don't pull these files up with the rest of the folder. And the last thing is the license. We're going to leave this as no license, but we'll talk about this later in the semester as far as different types of licenses that allow you to control how people use the work you put out on the internet. All right, we're all set. We have configured our new repository, so we're going to come down and click Create. And now here we are in our new repository. We see up here, we've got the name. We've got the little About section over here on the right that lets people know what this repository is about. And then here in this middle section is the actual folder, the collection of files. Right now, the only file we have in this program is the readme.md file. And all it says is the name of the program or the repository, and then our little about. All right, so this is how we create a new repository on github.com. If you need to go back and look at any of those steps again or catch up, go ahead and pause the video now, and we'll continue on in a second. All right, now that you've had a chance to create your first repository, we're going to go over to GitHub Desktop. Right now, that project exists in the remote repository up on github.com, but we want to clone it so that we have a copy of it here on our local repository on our computer. To do that, we are going to come up to the top left where we see the current repository, and this is just going to open up whatever the last project you worked on was. But we'll hit the down arrow, and then we'll come over and choose the Add button. Clone repository. And then we're going to search. There we go, Creative Classroom Technologies. Let's go ahead and click on that, and then clone it. And there we go. Now we've cloned a copy of that repository from the remote repository to our local repository. You can see it's right up here. You'll also notice, if we move over one tab, that we're currently on the main branch. And we talked about this the other day as well. The main branch is the main project. This is where we put all of our changes once we know that they're good to go. Now, we don't want to make edits to our main branch. We want to make another branch to test stuff out on and make changes on. And to do that, we click this drop-down arrow, and then we choose New Branch right here. And we're going to name the branch. For this lesson, let's call it First Log. That's going to be a log, like an entry in a journal. All right, and then you can create the branch. And there we go. Now we're not going to publish the branch yet. We're going to go and actually make some changes to it first. And in order to do that, we need to open up our repository in a program where we can actually edit it. And that's where we're going to come down here where it says Open in Visual Studio Code. Now I'm going to pause real quick. If you don't see this button, we're going to configure that real quick. You would come over to the settings, and it opens up the settings window and it puts you on the integrations tab. And under external editor, if it doesn't already say Visual Studio Code, you'll click the drop down and it will be here for you to select. And then once it's there, you go and click save. Mine's already set up, so I'm just going to leave it. All right, we're ready to go and open the project in Visual Studio Code. All right, and here we are. We can see that we've got our repository over here. I'm going to close that real quick. Our repository over here, and it's got our readme.md file. We're going to go and add a new file where we'll add our daily updates so that we can log what we learned in class that day. To do that, we come up to this first drop-down option where it's got the name of our repository. And when we hover over it, you'll see that we have 4 different options here. We're going to go with the first one, the paper with the plus on it, to add a new file. And then we have to name the file. So I'm going to call this, I'm going to put it in all caps so it's easy to read, class log. Dot, and then in lowercase, MD. And I'm going to press return. And now I've added a new file to my repository. When we come over here, we see that it's telling us that we can generate code or select a language or just start typing. And that's what we're going to do. What we're going to start with today is we're going to put today's date, and then we're going to go ahead and we're going to type what we learned in class today. So I've already got this copied because I did this earlier. And there we go. It's 9/5/25. And then today I learned how to create a new repository on github.com, clone that repo to GitHub Desktop, create a new branch, add a new file to my repo, commit the changes, and push the changes to the remote repository on github.com. Now don't worry, we're going to take care of the commit and the push in a second. But I'm going to pause right now, and you should pause the video, and take a moment to make sure that you've entered this information on your classlog.md. You also don't have to copy this word for word. Put it in your own words. What did you learn today? All right, so you've gone and you've added your first log to the class log file. Now we need to save these changes here on Visual Studio Code. We do that by taking our cursor up to the top of our screen. And when we do that, we get this menu option that shows up. You want to go to File, and then come down to Save. You'll notice it's got some shortcuts here. So in the future, instead of doing this, you could just hold down your Command button, which is the one next to your spacebar on the Mac, and then the S button, and it will save for you instead of having to navigate to this menu. But we'll go ahead and save it right now. And if you're ever curious if it's saved or not, you can come down to the timeline here at the bottom, click it, and you'll see, there we go. We just saved the file. All right, we're now done in Visual Studio Code. We're going to go back over to GitHub Desktop. All right, we can see we're in this new branch, the first log branch that we created. On the repo on the left, we can see the new file we created, classlog.md. And then in the middle section for the code, it's showing us the changes that we made to this file. In this case, we added 3 lines, and that's why they're showing up in green. Down here on the left, here's where we're going to move on to the next step where we commit these changes. So we take the snapshot of the project, how it looks right now, and we save it to our local repository and computer. So here we can see the title of this commit is called create classlog.md because that's the file we created. And we're going to give a very brief but descriptive entry here that would let other people know this is what changed in this commit. So here I'm going to say added classlog.md and added a log for today. And then I'm going to go and commit that. All right, so now GitHub Desktop has a screenshot of the program, how it looks right now. But github.com, our remote repository, doesn't have any of these changes yet. So the first thing we're going to do is come over to the middle of the screen, and it's going to say, hey, you've got this branch called first log that hasn't been published to github.com yet. How about we do that? And we're going to say, yeah, publish the branch. After that, it's going to say, hey, this new branch you published has some changes to it that aren't on github.com yet. Let's go ahead and create a pull request to send those on up to our original file. And we'll click on that to do it. and it's going to automatically open us up back into github.com. Let's take a moment just to review the pull request and what all is going on this page. So the pull request is when we have information from our local computer that we want to pull up to our github.com repository. So that's going from the local repository on your computer to the remote repository on the web. We see here, this pull request is comparing the main branch and everything in that version to the first log branch that we just created. And it's going to see what's different, and then it's going to see if there are any errors or conflicts where we would accidentally be erasing something that's currently in the main branch. And if there is, it will let us know. If not, it will say, hey, you're good to go ahead and merge these. So we've got our title, create class log.md. We've got our description. You guys will realize this was just the commit name and message. So this looks good to me. I'm going to create the pull request. And now the computer is going to check and see if we have any conflicts. We can see that we don't, and that makes sense because this is our first time updating this file. Excuse me, not file. This is our first time updating this repository. The distinction matters. Files are inside repositories. Repositories are the entire project. But getting back to it, we're good to merge this pull request, which means we're going to take all of the changes from our first log branch and we're going to make them official and add them to the main branch. So it's just going to confirm that this is what we want that commit message to say. I'm going to confirm the merge. And we successfully went and updated our repository. The last thing you have to do here is going to say, hey, we successfully merged that and closed that action that you asked us to do. You can now delete that first log branch because you no longer need it. All that information's been merged into the main project. So I'm going to delete the branch. All right, now if we scroll up and go back to the code tab up here to look at the repository, we'll see that it's been updated with this classlog.md file. And when we click on it, we can see that first log entry that we added to it. So there we go. That's lesson number 3 for GitHub. We learned how to create a repository on github.com. We learned how to set it up. We then learned how to move over to GitHub Desktop and clone that repository so we had a local version to work with. We learned how to create a new branch so that we had a safe place to work on changes. And then we learned how to open up the repository in Visual Studio Code so that we could actually make changes, add files like we did, name the file, and then add content to that file. We saved our work in Visual Studio Code. Then we went back to GitHub to commit those changes, get that snapshot of what the project looks like right now. And then from there, we were able to add the new branch to our repository on github.com and then push those changes that we made all the way up the line so that they became part of our official project online.